So you always say that people are say that films are film noir and that they're absolutely wrong, that the films they think are film noir are not really film noir. They see any black and white movie and they think it's film noir and they're wrong. And now you just saw a film for the first time that you loved. You saw it on Canopy. It's called The Big Combo. And I said, now is this a film noir film to you? And you said yes. And I said, okay, so what makes The Big Combo a true noir film, whereas others are just black and white films, regardless of whether they're good or not, they're not noir. Um,
So you want me to explain what I think film noir is all about?
well, specifically, what makes The Big Combo a film noir? Because that's an example we have right at our fingertips.
Well, the big combo, if you're talking about it from our point of view right now, is is already part of history because its director, Joseph H. Lewis, also directed a movie called Gun Crazy,
Uh-huh.
which is generally considered maybe one of the classic film noirs, and its cinematographer was John Alton, who, along with Nicholas Musaraka, were among the famous cinematographers who gained their reputations by working in that particular medium. Now, the medium itself, I mean, that there was a dark side that was being explored in movies goes back. It's always been true of film. But what film noir basically was to me, and I think it was initially, this is what it was. It was post-war, which meant after 1945, films that were made by Americans that expressed a kind of post-war malaise at the time, which was never explored before in movies. There's this undercurrent of danger, of violence, or negativity. I mean, we were tended to be a kind of a cheery point of view, which did not mean that we didn't make dark films like the ones that people now consider film noir classics, but they aren't film noir at all for this reason. They were made by major studios. If they were nominated for an Academy Award, they were not what you would consider noir. Noir was post-war. It was usually made by Poverty Row Studios, which means studios like Republic or Monogram or Allied Artists, and studios didn't have enough money to make major films, and they made what they called programmers. So that when you went to a movie in those days, you'd go to a double bill, and the second half of the double bill would be what they'd call a programmer. And many of those films, and probably the most famous of all was a movie called Detour, just kind of became popular primarily because they were discovered because you went to see the major movie and discovered instead this interesting little movie that came before it, or in case you came in late to the other movie, you saw it afterwards, I don't know. But anyway, it was film, and it was also about the malaise that took place during our time. It was the antidote to the best years of our lives, if you want to talk of it in that way. And there were some studios with a little bit more money, like Universal and RKO, who kind of used it. They had a lot of contract workers. They made films for their contract workers, which had these qualities, but they began to make them on a bigger scale. And so,
And were those films noir?
I would say that they were not pure film noirs, but at least they were in the correct mode. And they came at the same time. My complaint about now is that people put on their lists movies like Laura, which was a big hit. If movies played Radio City Music Hall, they were not film noir. Film noir was the film that came to your neighborhood on the double bill with some major film. that had been released.
Well, just because that's how it started, why can't films like
Well,
Laura be a continuance?
Well, if you want to say it's a, then we now have Brit noir, British noir. We have French noir. Some people think it started in France because film noir is a French expression, but that's just, it had nothing to do with French films. If anything, the French were making films very similar years before, and yet they were called, I think, Rose Maudit, something like that, almost like evil pink or something.
I just want to say something. You look fat on the camera, but you don't. You look more fat on the camera than in real life. So you're going to look at it and say, I look fat, and you don't look this fat in real life. That's all I'm saying. Go on with the film noir.
Well, I mean,
Because why? I mean, why can't a big studio make a film noir?
well,
Is
nowadays,
it confined to the
yes,
period? Is
there is.
confined to a period of time?
It to me, it is confined to a period and a time and a country, and it's also confined,
As well as
and it's
studios.
also confined to discovering major talents in studios that couldn't afford to make good movies.
But you're also saying, you're saying
And
it also depends on budget and studio.
And one of the things that was interesting is because they didn't pay as much attention to those films, they were less compromised. If you went to see what they called a film noir, like Double Indemnity, Double Indemnity had so much money at it,
Well, is it at least noir-esque?
well, because we have the way we look at it now, you could say, yes, all of those films were noirish, but they also preceded the war, which from my point of view makes them less pure as noir films. To simply have dark themes or to simply be beautifully photographed in black and white and to be made basically in that vague area between the 30s and the 50s, that just makes it easier to sell film noir. You could sell more books. You were selling more pictures of what film noir. You know, if you had to really make a book of photographs of posters from film noirs, you probably have a book that was 20 pages long. And now you have thousands. I mean, every film you love, I've seen lists of my favorite film noirs, and none of them would fit on my category. They include Sunset Boulevard. Well, Sunset Boulevard is just a great movie, and basically some of the best film noirs are great movies too. Out of the Past is a great movie. He Walked by Night is just photographically, some of them are amazing. There is something to admire. I happen to like film noir as a genre.
All right, I have two questions.
Yes.
So nothing before 1945 is true noir. So when did the true noir period end?
I would say in the 50s, when we started to make more studios kept making more movies that were told the truth about what was going on in the world. We happen to be a very optimistic, cheery country. I'm telling you, even when Frank Capra told us everything was shit, he would always still have people ending up at the end saying, "But we're getting through it." You know, that was the American spirit, and that permeated all films, even films with dark themes. But the films like Pitfall, films like Out of the Past, they kind of looked at the world in a way that was totally different. But once we started incorporating all those qualities, I would say that the true film noir disappeared. People would say otherwise, but there is a great profit motive in maintaining the reputation of film noir because there are film festivals now. There's a TV program that week after week after week rediscovers some real film noirs, but also throws in a lot of stuff that isn't film noir at all.
So I have a question. When did the term film noir come about? Did it come about during the film noir period or after?
Oh, I think it came out after. I think they were.
Oh, after.
Yes, I think that mostly they were considered those intelligent, dark
So
films.
the whole film noir era happened, and then they said, "Hey, did you see these films? Let's call it film noir."
Well, I don't know. It may have been a publicity thing. I don't know. But someone gave it a French name, so it must have been a film critic somewhere who did it.
Of course, of course. Probably true.
So who knows where it started? But that to me is basically when you say British noir. Yes, the British were making dark films too, but they are not. They do not come. They don't come from the same philosophy.
But they can call it British noir, and because it's not.
And we do.
Noir, it can be its own
Listen,
genre.
we now have Japanese noir. We have.
Well,
Yes, and it's true.
They're genre-inspired genres.
And a lot of those great noir films that we now call Japanese noir films, like early Kurosawa films, he was stealing from American movies. Don't think he wasn't. You know.
Okay. So what about the big combo in particular? Talk about that in terms of.
Well, from every shot is so beautiful. I mean, it's startling in its use of shadow and light, and mostly in shadow. And the camera is expressive. Because, and also, it didn't have the world's best actors, but the actors were all allowed to present aspects of their character which showed human flaw, whether you were a good person, a villain, or a good guy in this film.
But that was in the writing, not in the acting.
But that it existed at all. Well, I think writing had a great deal to do with what we call film noir. It was an attitude towards life. I mean, we were seeing suddenly the family structure was disappearing. You know, the family structure was boring and suburban, if you recall, in those films. For many Americans, it was the first time they lived well. But from the point of view of these films, it was like that was the trap you were going to get into. That middle class life, you know, a film like Pitfall, to me, whether it's absolutely a perfect film noir example of film noir, is that it contains all the themes that film noir is connected to, and it's also obviously a low budget film, but it's got a star, it's got 2 stars, and.
You're not talking about the big combo.
No, now I'm talking about Pitfall.
Okay.
Pitfall. My favorite out of film noirs, now Big Combo is definitely one of them, I gotta say.
And what studio was that?
That was Allied Artists.
Okay.
Out of the Past is classic because it's just one of those films you just never get tired of seeing. It's always a surprise to me, and it's twisted in a really interesting way. I mean, and I love Pitfall. I love Pitfall a lot. It's probably my favorite, and but there are lots of them. Gun Crazy, They Live by Night, T-Men. Which he does have a happy ending because it was about, you know, the Treasury Department. But up until then, it was wonderful. Or He Walked by Night. They're just, some of them are just beautiful to look at, but they also all totally capture that particular moment in time, what America was becoming after the war.
Okay.
The dark side, and not just the light side.
Got it. Let's end on that note.
Okay.